You did see where SB 899 made it through.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things we'll talk about is what this kind of information means for us and the subcommittee scope. I appreciated that draft document. That was very helpful.
Good morning, Brian.
Morning. Good morning.
I haven't seen you today, so good morning.
Good morning.
Okay. So are we, Ryan, are we ready to go?
Yes, everyone. Yeah, it's being
Yeah, we're
recorded and
good.
we're ready.
Yes, we're ready to go.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay, so do we need to read this? Shall I read this? Please note that the Thursday, July 9th, 2020 Legislative Subcommittee meeting will be conducted pursuant to the California Executive Order N2920. The meeting will be held via teleconference and subcommittee members will participate via teleconference. Those locations are not listed on the agenda and are not accessible to the public. The following legislative subcommittee members are listed to permit them to appear electronically or telephonically at the legislative subcommittee meeting on Thursday, July 9th, 2020, Vice Mayor Liz Gibbons and Councilmember Ann Bybee. Those members of the public wishing to participate are asked to register in advance. After registering, you will receive a confirmation email containing information about joining the meeting. So with that, we will open the meeting. Do we have any communications from the public at all?
No.
Okay. All right. So the agenda is unfinished business. So we received the draft legislative advocacy principles, which was based on council meeting last fall. And I was very helpful to have that, and the annotated copy, track changes copy was very helpful as well. So shall we go around the room and see if people have comments on that draft advocacy principles? Anne, do you want to comment on anything?
Sure. There's a couple things that I think the count that should be changed, and it shouldn't really be the subcommittee that's recommending the or taking positions. I really feel that it's really should be the mayor taking a position, as long as the legislation is according to our guiding principles. I think that was part of the discussion with the last subcommittee, is that since we had whether or not the mayor would want to sign a letter because of his or her personal bias regarding the legislation, it should still be a city position, and it should be coming from the mayor. So I think that was one of the big discussions with the last subcommittee, and I really feel that it should be a mayor-driven letter rather than a subcommittee letter. So that's one thing that I and maybe it's best to go through each section and kind of talk through the proposed changes.
Okay, so that's a whatever. I was just thinking big picture comments, but we can go through a paragraph. I thought big picture comments would help us focus on what was important.
Okay, and to me, that was the main thing, was trying to come up with a policy so that when we feel that we need to take a position on legislation, that we have some guiding principles in order to allow the current mayor to do that on behalf of the city, regardless of their individual position.
Okay, so I totally agree with you that was a key discussion point. So help me understand how we get past so I have two considerations. One was for efficiency. What Cities Association does is they write these principles, and then the legislative subcommittee reviews any legislation, and the subcommittee takes a position. And if it varies, it goes back to the full board, but if it's consistent with the policies, I think I'm saying this right. If it's consistent with the policies, the subcommittee writes the letter and it is signed by the chair of the Cities Association. So my goal was to try and my comments were trying to figure out how to expedite things so that we didn't get hung up having to bring everything back to council. No other reason than timing wise, sometimes things are super time sensitive. And so the subcommittee, legislative subcommittee drafts and writes all the letters at Cities Association, and they just give it to the president to sign. So that was my one goal here. And then the second goal is how do we adjust for what you just described, which is what happens if the mayor refuses to sign something that the legislative committee puts forward as being consistent with the policies.
So in terms of the global, with the vice mayor, just in terms of the global intent of the policy, that was my, that was the same goal I had in putting together where if the council adopts this policy, right, giving the subcommittee the authority to take position on legislation as long as it's within principles. So I hope that comes out. That's always been the written intent. I know that I hope so. I hope that's what comes out and that's what we can finalize.
So that to me does that, but Anne, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that the council needs to adopt this policy, and that regardless of an individual's opinion, that as long as the position is based on the guiding principles, the mayor should be signing the letter.
So, and you're speaking in the process in section 5 where we say staff will prepare position letters for the mayor's subcommittee signature. We just say for the mayor's signature.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, and that's the way it should work.
Yeah, I'm just making sure I'm looking at the same thing you are.
Yeah. I don't have an objection to that. The problem is, what if we have another problem? Because it did happen last year.
I understand that. And so I guess in my view, and maybe it's, unrealistic, is when you have a policy, it should be followed regardless of who's mayor. But that's my 2 cents on it.
Well, and this is, we did have that issue, Liz, with Rich, but we didn't have this policy established yet. So maybe that gives us some, to Anne's comment, does that give us enough leverage to tell the mayor that's pursuant to the policy, you're obligated to sign this by city policy?
Okay. If that's fine. I was trying to prevent a problem.
No, you're right. That was the issue we had. Rich refused to sign something. We didn't have anything to force him to do it. And then how do we do it? That's why we had added the subcommittee in here. But Anne, maybe you're right. Since we adopt this as a policy, that probably does give us more leverage to require the mayor to actually indicate their signature. And I suppose in this case, if they didn't, we had turned to the vice mayor to sign on their behalf.
Okay. I'm comfortable if you two or you three are all comfortable. I am too. So that's fine. So then shall we go through the paragraphs, Anne? I have some comments, a couple of places.
Okay.
So we'll go through paragraph purpose makes sense. Paragraph 2, role of the committee. I have one small comment, which is just a language thing on the second line, or as needed to review.
Yeah, I picked up on that as well.
Oh, good. I'm getting better.
You get that, Margarita?
Yep, as needed review. Yep. Thank you.
Review?
Yes.
All right.
Anything else on paragraph 2?
I'm okay with it.
of the subcommittee are appointed by the mayor, is recommended. I think that makes sense.
I would make one change, in the second sentence, to make it a little clearer, just to say that it is recommended that the council member appointed to represent the city of Campbell on cities association also be appointed as one member of the legislative subcommittee
Okay.
of information.
Yeah,
Okay.
Just more of a clarification.
Okay. Rereading the sentence. So the subcommittee can, should it say, I'm back on the first paragraph. The subcommittee shall recommend to the city council a legislative and policy platform that is for council approval to establish the city's legislative priorities for the calendar year. Rather than says, I mean, this reads to me that the subcommittee establishes the priorities, but doesn't it have to be approved by the council?
It says that they can recommend to the city council.
Oh, I see. I didn't read back far enough. Okay. The subcommittee can recommend. How about the subcommittee shall rather than can?
Sure. I see it as that the policy scope probably isn't going to change a lot from year to year. I mean, our objectives are pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So there shouldn't be, in my view, a lot of deviation from, or a lot of change that's going to be needed in the policy, if we go by what our guiding principle.
Cities Association tweaks it every year, not much, but tweaks based on identified pending, when all the legislation comes through, they kind of get a sense of what's coming up, and sometimes they tweak it a little bit.
Okay.
I think we had a copy of what the Cities Association legislative policy was. I think Diana found that for us before our last meeting. Let's see if I can dig that up. Okay, so
the intent here and was that if the subcommittees, for example, last year was a big housing year, it's as is this year. If the subcommittee wanted to tell the council, we want to really focus on housing bills, and that's what we're really going to be looking at density bonus, whatever a particular platform may be for any given year, it gives the subcommittee that latitude to ask the council for approval to focus, to say this year, this is our focus.
Right. One of the things that's come up that Councilmember Bybee was very sharp on last time we met was the fact that at the last minute, they put a whole bunch of law enforcement legislation in, literally the last hour of the last day. So that's a good example of how we would have to update policies, because I don't think anybody thought about that earlier on.
Yep. I mean, we can strike out that entire sentence. It's
No, I think it's
Yeah, it's good.
okay. Okay, so policy scope. So here, I'm transitioning to it. The subcommittee may, let me read it out loud. The subcommittee may take a position on proposed legislation if such legislation is consistent with the following, okay? And then, so here is where I was wondering, would we add, and the wording is very difficult. So the one that Rich would not sign had to do with clean energy. The state was changing the regulation on how, my memory serves, how direct access could be expanded to the detriment of clean energy cost effectiveness. The legislation put the financial viability of clean energy groups at risk. So the clean energy lobbying group asked all clean energy organizations to have their membership write letters in opposition to it. So it was kind of a pass-through situation. Rich was not comfortable signing that. So how in the language here, how in this do we, and the same thing I'm thinking is true about police policies. Am I trying too hard? I'm just trying to make it so that the policy is flexible but clear. And that clean energy one was very time sensitive.
Yeah, again, this is where I have a little bit of difficulty, because I think it should say the city council, mayor should take a position as long as we're following the guiding principles. And that's kind of what we struggled with the last committee review. And we talked about, well, then the subcommittee could sign a letter if the mayor isn't willing to do that. To me, that dilutes a bit the city's position on it if this, if it falls within our guiding principles.
Okay, so let me say something back to you.
Okay.
This policy is for the subcommittee. Okay, so in that first sentence, the subcommittee may take a position on proposed. I think the subcommittee's role is to take a position
Okay.
if legislation is consistent with the principles. So I was okay with that change. So then the question then is, how is the position implemented? Which is the letter, the process, right? So we'd go down to the paragraph 5, which is process. Staff will prepare position letters for the mayor or subcommittees with signature. That's the one I think you have the most problem with. Question?
Yeah, I think we just say for the mayor's signature.
Okay. With the
I'm
mayor's,
okay with that. I'm okay with that. I mean, if it doesn't work again, we'll have to deal with it, but I'm okay with that.
Mhm.
Well, I think
And-
having the policy does allow us to point to a city policy that requires a mayor's signature, whether they agree or not.
Yeah.
So
And I think,
I'm just, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, I think it gives us a little bit more leverage to compel, where we didn't have that with Rich, where he says, well, tell me where I have to sign this. Tell me where I'm required to sign this. So
Okay.
we could point to the
So-
policy.
Okay, so if we do that, so if we go back to roles, so we've gone through the roles with paragraph 3, policy scope. Anne, are you okay with my comment that the subcommittee may take a position if the legislation is consistent with the following? And then staff draft a letter?
Yeah. I so this is a council policy, and it's identifying what the role of the subcommittee is, and that the subcommittee is recommending that the council take a position, but I'm okay with the way you described it.
All right, so it's worth a try. If you're okay with it, it's worth a
Yeah.
try. I'm fine with the mayor signing it. So what do we do about, how do we handle urgent matters? Like what happened last year with the clean energy, the city was asked to sign a letter. In some cities, the mayor just signs those kinds of things. Does the subcommittee need to be involved? So, and what do we want to do about, and I am concerned about the police ones coming up because they're going to hit hard and fast.
Well, in my mind, I think this allows the committee, if it falls within those policy scopes, they're fairly broad. If the council agrees to that, to draft a letter for the mayor's signature without having to go back to the council. once we've annually had the policy approved, the platform approved by the council, we may change that platform. It could be these policy scopes and 2 or 3 other things that we add. But once we get council's approval, I think that's the purpose. We would be able to just write letters more expedient, consistent with that policy platform.
I'm fine with that if people think the content is appropriate.
I guess the question I'd have in my mind is that the policy scopes A through D there in item 3 or A through E,
Yeah.
broad enough to cover things like SVCE, the things you mentioned. I think it is, but if you don't, we could add to it or broaden those.
Well, I'm looking for input. I just don't want us to get stuck. So.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you.
I agree with the city manager. In addition, I think if you could use a test bill, for example, if you look at that new bill that was introduced at the last day of session SB 731, the Bradford bill about police officer decertification.
Right.
I think that it would if the mayor wanted to take an immediate position, it would fall under directly impact cities' finances, responsibilities, legal authority, or operations.
And I was thinking, could we add directly impacts the city's finances, responsibilities, legal authority, public safety, or operations?
Yep.
That makes me feel
Okay.
yeah.
Yes.
It narrows it a little bit, but keeps it broad still.
Okay.
Yeah, but it makes me comfortable that something's actually, what's the right phrase? There's something actually there that speaks to the issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Got that, Margarita?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So let's see, here's the 2020, the 2009, I'm looking on Cities Association webpage, 2019 legislative guiding principles, and then the 2020 policy position statement. So let's see. Guiding principles. So I'll just read it a little bit here. The Cities Association takes positions on federal, state, and legislative issues that may impact its member cities, so as to advocate for the interest of member cities. In most cases, positions are taken by the Board of Directors after receiving a recommendation from the Legislative Action Committee. However, legislative issues occasionally arise in a fashion that prevents timely deliberation and response from the board. To address such occasions, the Board of Directors establishes this list of standing legislative advocacy positions. When time does not permit consideration by the full board, the president of the Cities Association is empowered to advocate for or against issues according to these standing legislative advocacy positions. This was sent to us by Diana, on June 9th. On June 9th, Diana sent us an email with a link to this, what I'm reading. You want me to re-forward it to everybody?
I'm okay.
I can look for it, Liz.
Okay.
I'm
So,
okay. One thing that I found interesting when you read that is that it said when time does not permit the full board to consider it.
yes, I thought so too. Yeah.
It kind of it muddies the waters a little bit of, can you still bring this to the council? And I think our purpose was to try to be expedient about it all the way around, that we're not bringing 1 or 2 items to the council. So once the council's adopted these principles, we don't have that caveat that if time permits, we still bring it to council, if that makes sense.
I see your point. So
And I don't know if that's an issue. I think maybe the council doesn't want to see all these things if it meets their principles. I don't know. I could argue it either way.
yeah, so can I. And I think the Cities Association does the same thing. I think they just write the letters.
Yeah.
So general administration, municipal revenue, so I'm just giving the categories, municipal revenue. The Cities Association recognizes it's, so what I'm getting at is we have those principles in there. And are they sufficient versus what the Cities Association does, which is much more explicit. So that's the only reason I'm bringing it up is they handle it a little bit differently. If we're comfortable, so they do things that categories of municipal revenue and a bunch of subpoints. They do land use with some subpoints. They do public works with some subpoints. They do environment, economic development, library services, education, and human rights. So those are the broad categories. And if we don't want to take as detailed a position as what they do, so for under municipal revenue, it says opposition to unfunded mandates, protecting tax exempt municipal bonds, improved access to grants, reimbursements, CalPERS stability, that kind of thing. So it helps, maybe it's more of this document is more of an educational thing of the kind of issues that get covered.
It is, and I would suggest that sometimes more specificity could be limiting than less specificity in that.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm
Yeah.
not disagreeing, but I just think it's informative to see what they did and why.
I agree.
And are you okay leaving it? I'm going to call it as general as we have.
I think it's better to keep it at a higher level and more general so that we have the flexibility and the understanding that, like the CalPERS, if that's going to impact us, or there's something that we need to jump on. I mean, that's
Okay.
covered under A, city finances, local control.
Yeah.
So I just think it's better to be less specific.
Okay. Okay. I mean, it's certainly easier to agree on with less specificity.
Yeah.
I know that this document took about 4 months to get written. So
And you know, I'm kind of I feel like, okay, so we've got, as long as we have something in place, it can always be tweaked, or this is a good starting point. We need to adjust. We have that flexibility to do that.
okay, so I would simply offer that in terms of the legislative subcommittee's resources, that we keep track of what the Cities Association does and what their statements are. So if we need it as a resource to how they might be handling it, we can use that as an issue comes forward. Just a resource. Okay.
And to tag on to that, I mean, also the league.
Yes, precisely. Yes, thank you for that. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Although I find I don't agree with the league on some things. The new management, the new leader at the league is very timid, very, very timid. And it's a lot of people have commented that it's not as support, it's not as what's the right word? It doesn't advocate for cities as much as it used to. It's advocating more as a get along kind of structure. So going back to paragraph 2, we're okay. Paragraph 3, we're okay. Paragraph 4 is objectives. We're now saying we're okay.
mhm.
I wrote one thing here, which, okay, so I'll come back to my comment. Process, I'm okay just saying position letters for the mayor.
Yeah.
Signature,
Mhm.
Yes.
okay, I'm okay with that. Okay, council members, represent the city on regional.
And just to add on to that, if there is a problem with the mayor wanting or not wanting to sign a letter, then to me, it would fall to the vice mayor because that's,
Great.
Okay, at least we get two positions if we needed. Okay, that's fine with me procedurally, that's fine.
Do you want us to list the mayor or vice mayor's signature in their absence?
well, I'd rather keep it for the mayor's signature so that we have something to say, the mayor's, but generally when the mayor isn't available, the vice mayor is the person that steps in, so.
I agree. I'm with you.
Understood.
Yeah, interesting. My machine puts emails in. We're getting an email from the water department about an increase on the ballot measure. Okay, so where we are now, the last paragraph we took out, the council members representing the city on regional and or bodies, other bodies should use their discretion and take action based on the intent of the policy. This relates to cities association. Sometimes the cities association representative doesn't agree with the city policy, and then they'll vote their own policy, their own position, as opposed to what this represents. So that's why I think it was in there. Do people not comfortable with that? Should we just, I mean, over the years, there've been, sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't. It just varied on whoever filled the role, frankly.
So when I reviewed the December 2019 meeting, one of the parts of the conversation dealt with that sentence, saying that you don't want to hamper an individual opinion when that person is representing at another body. Same thing with in a section 3 in the policy scope section, item D. I struck out past action for with a similar concern that you don't want to councils change, so we don't want to behold the current council to a past action.
Okay, I'm fine if that covers the discussion and it's consistent with the previous discussion. Anne?
And I think that's what hung up the council and finally approving what we had proposed was that last sentence. That's
Okay.
stricken. So
Okay.
with, taking it out.
Okay, I'm fine with that. So the only other thing, so I was looking at this a little differently than you, Anne, described, because I was looking at this as the subcommittee. So the title of this is Legislative Advocacy Principles versus where I was coming from, which is a legislative advocacy subcommittee description. I just have to switch my mind a little bit. I'm okay with what we're doing. The question I had is when there's legislation that's come through, how can this, so it doesn't fit. See, I'll be clear in a second. When we talk about this as legislative advocacy principles, what I spoke to the other day with us is I was thinking, how does the subcommittee assist the city in recommending next steps? So like if legislation gets passed, so to me, there should be some product that lists the laws that get passed. And there's some kind of a memo that is put together that says these are the laws that passed and these are the ones that will impact the city departments. And next steps are required. No action is required or no action. How do we, because what happens is this whole thing sits and nobody's tracking the impact of the legislation specifically on our city and specifically what happens. I mean, one of my pet peeves is the objective standards. They went into effect in January of 2018, to my knowledge, and we still don't have those. And I'm saying if we knew in 2017 that legislation passed, staff could have been notified to be proactive at implementing objective standards. So I was looking for this subcommittee to provide that tool of information to the city staff.
And Liz, maybe the appropriate, we could do that at the end of the legislative year, but maybe the appropriate time is if we do it that way, or we do it at the time that we do our council strategic planning. So
That's too late. That's too late. Brian, you gone mute.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Now we can.
I'm
Everything.
suggesting as we develop our work plans and go through our process that we are mindful of these so we don't lose sight of them when we do our work plans, which typically is not the same time of year.
It's the timing is wrong. That's what's happening. The timing is wrong. So we find out typically in September, all the regulations that have to be implemented January 1st. So there somehow needs to be a report out of all the things that have taken place that require city action by the first of the year. Because I mean, we had the same problem with the ADUs. We were non-compliant with ADUs for at least a year and a half. So Anne, your thoughts?
Well, I'm kind of just thinking off the top of my head. I look at that as a operational staff function and not necessarily a function of the subcommittee and what our role is. And maybe, and I'll leave this up to staff to talk about, is to come up with some type of a summary of what was passed, and these are the areas that staff needs to be focusing on in the next year or whatever work plan.
Can we put under objectives something that's I'm struggling with this. I don't disagree with what you're saying. Can we put underneath this under objectives a final objective to inform staff to inform, how about this? Staff to inform council of the impact of legislation passed at the end of each session? Or am I trying too hard again?
Well, so I see it as, let's take the ADU as an example. So that legislation passed, it's now up to staff to implement that, and not the role of the subcommittee to be tracking that, I guess. And it should be just a natural outcome of the legislation that's passed.
Yeah.
So if I can comment, usually at the end of the legislative cycle in October, November at the latest, we've issued like an end of session memo that highlights kind of all the main bills that were passed that the city had been tracking. In that, I mean, we can just add a sentence saying that city staff will be looking at how to implement the policy in policy change, or how to implement this bill in the coming year. I mean, it's just one line that we can say this bill has repercussions on our operations, and city staff will be incorporating that.
So that's fine with me. Again, it's a matter of timing. If they pass it, I think the final governor's signature is like the 15th of September, something like that. There's a date in September. If staff doesn't know about it and start working on it on the September, they won't have the legislation ordinances changed by January 1st. That's not our city problem. It's the way the timing works. But if we wait till November, we're automatically going to be out of sync.
Yeah, so what we've started to do is we've kind of worked through this last year as we develop, Marguerite develops this watch list on any of those bills that we're watching or taking positions are. We notify those departments for those that affect their department so that they could start tracking them and understanding and evaluating the impacts, not just as on a committee level, but as an operational level. So we'll reinforce that through this process, but I think your comments are right, that staff can't wait till October to figure out what we're going to do in the next 2 months to do it. It really is in February as these get introduced, and maybe the bills change over time, but certainly by September, we have to have a pretty good idea of how we're going to implement that if it's passed. So,
Yeah, I mean, strictly speaking, the session ends in August and you pretty much know what everything is passed. The only thing in September is the governor's signature. So you have a little more time. The governor may not sign some things, but at least that gives you a viable list of what's passed the legislature.
and maybe what we do is we take a list of bills, that we have this watch list and we have a table that we distribute as we revise that to the different departments. And there's a column in there that identifies the affected departments.
Okay.
I mean, we've done that, but we haven't formalized that. So maybe we can fine tune that a little bit to make sure.
Yeah. And I'm being fussy about this in the sense that so much is changing so fast. And we have several large projects and likely more coming through. I'm concerned, like what staff said in the last report, we don't yet have some standards. We don't yet have objective standards. So we don't have the right tool. So my concern is trying to give us as much time to prepare for the changes. That's my goal.
Yep.
Okay, so good conversation. Good results. Okay. If there's nothing else on this, are we good to go, Ann?
I'm happy with the changes.
So
Okay.
with those changes, would we get a motion or just a consensus of the subcommittee to recommend this policy with the changes we just discussed implemented for council's consideration at an upcoming meeting?
I would make that motion.
And I'll second it.
And we are in favor? Ann and I?
Yeah.
All right.
And
Thank
do
you.
we,
That motion passes. Ideally, we'd get it on the 21st agenda. That's really heavy. I don't know your interest. We want to get this done sooner than later, but we're going to start writing letters.
I mean, it could go as a consent calendar, maybe.
Yep. And the policies,
Try it.
we'll attach a staff report and I think we can bring that forward. Can you get that done for the?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Okay. And then we want to take positions, and we can in fact have the letters and things ready to go
At that meeting as well. Correct.
at that meeting. Okay, so Margarita, you want to go for our positions?
So I have three of these letters done. So I can send them out probably by end of day today as draft letters to take positions on. So SB 11, so there hasn't been any change in terms of none of these bills have gone to either the next committee or the next house. So 1120, what we are going to address is that it impacts our local control. It won't allow us to deal with localized neighborhood impacts or emphasize that our local standards take into consideration community input, they were developed via community input and taken into consideration I'm not going to use the word community character, but in essence, that. So that's the argument that we're using as to why we're opposing
So I'm going to use that, sorry, I'm going to interrupt, sorry. I'm going to use that as an example. We are reading the Cities Association policy statements might help you. There was a real effort not to use local control language. There was a real
Okay.
to,
I'm looking at that right now.
I'm sure, I don't know the letters that they've probably written letters on some of these, and you might look at those letters too.
Okay.
But that the goal, we're trying to say things like the city of Campbell is supportive of whatever the topic is, in a manner at which these issues are addressed. In its current format, we cannot support it, that kind of thing.
So I'm looking at the Cities Association legislative principles, Liz, and it says Cities Association respects the importance of local control over areas of municipal responsibility, and it opposes legislation and initiatives that weaken or eliminate existing local control.
Okay, and I think, so in discussions, there's been a lot of concern about using the language. So whatever,
Yeah.
tool for you to look at, and that's a perception, because it turns people, the comments made at the meetings is that turns people off when you use the language of local control, local control. So we were trying to write things that were supportive of the principle of building housing. You know, your first thing is we support increased affordable housing, we do this and that kind of thing. So that's a suggestion. Okay. Okay, so SB 795,
All right. SB 795.
that's Jim Bell's bill.
Oh yeah, we had a letter already supporting the version of this last year. So that'll just that'll just be edited, updated to reflect the new dollar amount. And but yeah, there's already it's in line and consistent with the council support last year.
Okay.
And that one is in the governor's. It will be it's in under governor review for signature.
Oh, it's gone through everything already?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gone through both houses. So it'll be a letter directly to the governor asking for his signature.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It hadn't gone through that far.
Yeah. And then the two density bonus bills, 1085 and AB 2345. Those so AB 10 SB 1085, that has to do it doesn't allow us to collect fees. So so that's one of the things that I was going to highlight. And AB 2345, there's a local control issue there. So I'll review it a little bit more closely to make sure that the language is more direct, but it says approve more units than what we are currently allowing within our zoning. So that's what the text of what I'm going to use in the letter.
Okay.
So I should have these out to you by the end of day today for review, and they can go into the packet for the July 21 meeting as part of the legislative subcommittee, the guiding principles.
And does that work for you?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Watch bills, SB 899. This is the one in principle, except and I haven't read the latest version of it, but it would allow, as I read it, I don't know if you found out anything different, Margarita, that it would allow anything to be built. No zoning regulations, no nothing.
I think if you're if it's only if you're within that it covers certain institutions, right? Like
Right.
religious and higher. I think Brian, we had reviewed this together as well, correct?
Yes, it just for housing development, not all projects.
I understood.
Yeah, okay, just making sure.
But there's no height limits, there's no setback limits, there's no FAR, there's no park, there's nothing, there's no guidance. So do we have to rezone those parcels with guidance? What I'm, am I explaining myself clearly enough? There's, it says they can build there. It doesn't, does that mean the city then has to do ordinances that, and zoning changes that define what can be built there?
I'll look at this a little bit clearer, get more clarity on that.
That was my issue, and I think others' issues with it.
No, it just is a matter of right. It doesn't say, it just, they can't be discretionary. So we can't require CUPs or anything for them or PD permits. It doesn't talk about not meeting our density standards.
Well, let's see, there's no zoning because it's zoned as an institution or a school or whatever. So we don't have.
I got your point. Let me find out how we would apply that.
Okay.
It's a good
That and my memory is going back a bit. I believe that was the same discussion at ABAG. No, people were not supportive of it because there was no clarity on how it would be regulated.
So this particular bill, SB 899, it passed to the assembly, and the interesting case with the assembly is right now they're kind of on hold because they're on they're just on hold because they've had a couple of staffers impacted with positive COVID-19 cases. So they've kind of paused their legislative session, but the speaker has committed to finishing the work of the legislative session. So
too bad.
yeah.
Okay. Any of the others in particular that you think we need to be super duper? And since they're on the watch list, this is an opportunity to get in there and support or oppose. This is a good opportunity to get a hold of Evan or anybody else. Is there anything in that group?
I could always send a email, to Evan saying that the subcommittee has identified, the legislative subcommittee has identified these bills on its watch list because of and I can quote what our draft policy says in terms of that it, why it's on a watch list.
Okay.
Just so he knows that the city is following these bills and is interested in its outcome, and to please let us know if a position letter or some kind of advocacy would be helpful on behalf of the city. I could do that.
Yeah, that's good. You could send it to Bell as well, but if you send something, one of the things with Jim Bell, and particularly since he's termed out, it would be nice to let him know, copy him on the letter of support to the governor on 795. We would write a letter to the governor to support that and copy Jim Bell.
Okay, so it goes through this portal, a legislative portal, and do you have a so I can the portal sends it automatically, but the last round of letters I did, I copied his staff. Would you have a direct email for the senator?
I could probably give it to you, Margarita.
Oh, okay, great. All right, because that was one issue that I couldn't get but I sent it to his staff saying the city of Campbell has yep, I will copy the his directly.
Yeah. Those things make a difference. And you could do the same thing with Evan Lowe. He may be co-sponsoring some of these bills that we oppose. So
okay.
He's the one that did the AB 1397, which is horrible.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there anything else you'd like information, guidance from us on?
No, I'm pretty, I have pretty good guidance in terms of the July 21 council report that's going to recommend adoption of the policy of the legislative advocacy principles. policy along with the 4 letters that we're recommending positions on, as well as email to both our senator and assembly member representatives on our wish list.
Anne, how does that sound?
So I just had one question about the letters. Now, the purpose of this policy was so that we didn't have to take the letters to the council, that we were just, they would be generated and get
Good,
copies.
good point, good point.
Necessary to bring those to the council on July 21st, or can we issue without taking to council?
Yeah. So, Anne, you stated
I mean,
out.
Oh, I'm sorry. So my question was, can we issue the letters without going to council? I'm okay with it going to council, but I thought that that was part of our purpose. And as long as the position was within the guiding principles that have already been established by the council.
That's correct. I was just doing it since the timing kind of coincided, but you're right. It might confuse the intent of the policy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, good comment. I agree.
I think Brian left us.
Oop. Okay. All right. Well done.
Back.
So
Yeah.
Brian, we've agreed that the letters don't need to go to council.
You're muted. Brian, you're muted.
Sorry about that. No, I got disconnected. I was going that direction and then I got logged off somehow. So yeah, I don't think if the council approves that, policy, we need to show those letters.
Okay, well, that's a lot accomplished.
Yep. Good
So
job, committee.
we should plan another meeting, I'm going to say in 2 weeks, because so much is happening. And Margarita, would it be appropriate, Brian, to ask Margarita to keep us, the council, the subcommittee informed of anything that's happening that we want to be aggressively active on sending a letter?
Yep, we'll do that.
Yeah, I already have a watch. I already subscribed to alerts for all the watch bills lists. So I am getting notifications from the legislature portal.
Perfect, perfect. Okay,
All right, thank you all for your time and efforts.
thank you. Appreciate it.
I have one quick question for Brian. Do you have time this afternoon for a quick phone call? Maybe after lunch? Can you give me a call, or
Yeah, after what time did you say?
after you have lunch? It's lunchtime, so.
Yeah, I have 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock meetings. I could probably do it at 2:30 or after 3:30.
Either way is fine, whenever you have time.
Okay. We'll
Thank
set something. Yeah, I'll call you.
All right, good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.